Radical Truth is a podcast produced by TBLI Group and hosted by Robert Rubinstein. TBLI is making the financial system work for all. Our podcasts cover the wide range of ESG and impact investing topics. What it is, why is it booming, is it really helping, is impact regenerative in nature, how will climate change impact investments. There will be regular interviews with thought leaders, some known, some not known, but all brilliant, and we will have engaging conversations with all of them. Can we create an economy based upon well-being? Let's make the financial system work for all. This is Radical Truth. ESG is mostly greenwashing. Christopher Marquis, Cambridge Judge Business School. Welcome to the TBLI Radical Truth podcast, where we feature pioneers redefining the purpose of capital. For 25 years, TBLI Group has been the world's leading ESG and impact investing network. TBLI Radical Truth is different. Most finance podcasts protect the industry. Radical Truth interrogates it. Unfiltered conversations with the founders, fund managers, and system changers actually moving capital toward a livable future and calling out the impact washing that is or isn't. No sponsors, no pretending. What if the corporate world's most celebrated sustainability pledge made companies worse, not better? In this episode, Robert Rubinstein, founder of TBLI Group, sits down with Professor Christopher Marquis, Senior Professor at Cambridge Judge Business School and author of The Profiteers, How Business Privatizes Profits and Socializes Costs. Formerly of Harvard Business School and Cornell, Christopher has spent 25 years researching corporate sustainability and became one of its sharpest critics. We explore why signatories of the Business Roundtable 2019 Stakeholder Pledge scored worse, not better, on environment and labor, how BlackRock's ESG commitments evaporated the moment Texas pulled its funds, why a carbon capture company raised over $1 billion without meaningfully removing carbon from the air, why MBA rankings are built on graduate starting salary, not education, how Costco's governance structure has kept it out of private equity hands. Real research, no greenwashing. For anyone serious about telling real sustainability work from a well-funded press release, this episode is essential listening. Let's get started with our guest, Professor Christopher Marquis. This is Radical Truth. Good afternoon. Today we have an incredibly special guest. I only met him about a week or 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, when I was speaking at a conference. I was chairing a session at a conference, B Corp Summit. I was very impressed. So today we have Professor Christopher Marquis, and he's one of the few professors that is actually quite outspoken about sustainability, the ESG space. So I was thrilled that he was willing to join us today. So Christopher, for those that are not familiar with you, who you are, what is your big purpose, where you teach, and the books that you've written, fill us in a little bit about your journey that led you to where you are. And thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Robert, for having me on. Really looking forward to our discussion. Happy to provide a little bit of background about myself, although I must admit it's a little bit of a windy road that I've had. I started off not thinking about becoming a business school academic. So I teach currently at the University of Cambridge, Judge Business School. And prior to that, I spent 6.5 years at Cornell and a little over a decade at Harvard Business School. And as you mentioned, I think you used the word term outspoken. And I think what you were referring to is a critical take that I've really been advocating regarding business sustainability over the past 3 or 4 years, really. And this sort of critical perspective really came about from my deep work with actually businesses that I really think are genuinely trying to actually make a difference in the world. And the way they were thinking about their impact was very different than what you were seeing among, in some ways, the big sustainability superstars. Like the Business Roundtable had this statement around taking care of stakeholders in 2019 that got all kinds of accolades. BlackRock and Larry Fink have, I think they backed away from it now, but for a while we're saying climate is important, ESG is important. But the thing is, as an academic, I really try to keep up with actually the reality of what's going on in the world. And if you look at things like the Business Roundtable is the easiest example to give, they said, and the Business Roundtable, as people probably know, is a trade group of the 200 largest US companies
Mhm.
involved in lobbying the government, and it's a lobbying organization, basically. So they said they're going to be focused on stakeholders, things like employees, customers, et cetera. But it turns out when actually a number of years later, people look and see if they actually did this, actually the opposite occurred. And this is
Mhm.
the thing that is so interesting to me from, I guess, in some ways, a research standpoint or intellectual standpoint. They got tons of accolades for saying they were going to focus on stakeholders, like front page New York Times. I mean, I was traveling in China at the time this came out, and a lot of people in China even knew about this. So this spread around the world and, became, sort of, really very, very, very well talked about. Uh, but not a lot of press when actually a number of investigations from The Guardian to Business Week to a number of academics have written very rigorous papers showing that actually these companies that said they were going to focus on stakeholders actually do the opposite. They are, compared to similar type of companies that did not sign on to the statement, they actually have worse environmental performance, worse labor performance. They're very active in lobbying the government around all kinds of, weakening standards. And so I think this is really telling as to how genuine much of the discourse around sustainability is. That actually it's a lot of greenwashing. And I think, this is something that needs to be called out and discussed more.
And did you do an MBA or did you do more of
Yeah,
a?
yeah. I did a PhD in sociology, but I also did an
Oh,
MBA. So
okay.
so yeah, my PhD is in sociology,
So you
and
you did you learn any bad social skills there?
I must have learned some, or at least maybe more critical social skills, because I did write this book called The Profiteers, and
Yeah.
I try to be constructive, but the title is The Profiteers: How Business Privatizes Profit and Socializes Cost. And so, it is foreground, definitely a critique of these companies like the Business Roundtable that through lobbying, through PR, communication, really try to convince us that they're doing the right thing, but actually, in reality, it's a big smoke screen. And I'd given a talk on this, and as a researcher and academic, I guess maybe I was a little naive, thinking like, okay, we are about producing knowledge from a disinterested perspective. But after giving a talk on it, one of my advisors from my dissertation came up to me and said, is your dean okay with you saying this? Uh, uh, he was a little worried about me that may, and I must say that, I've had no sort of repercussions. And I do think that maybe if I was in the US, there might be a little bit more scrutiny on me, but being in the UK, I think there, yeah, I think that academic freedom around these topics still exists.
And because when I was listening to your talk, it was, I thought, hey, this guy is a George Carlin fan, because you you were really speaking the radical truth. I thought I was one of the few that was saying that, but I tried teaching at MBA schools at the Rodham School of Management. I was very
Sure.
disappointed because none of the students followed their big purpose. They all, said, we want to go into sustainability. And they all went to A.T. Kearney and McKinsey,
Yeah.
except for one. There was only one that actually pursued that and taught at the American
Sure.
University in Paris.